Between the top 10 qualifying, there are 14 World Championships in there. That's mental, that. And then also, just after Schumacher and Zhou tangled at Raskas in lap 23, Sainz and Perez were actually right at the back of them. And by the time lap 24 started, we literally almost saw Sainz lose it and go into the wall. They were P5 and P6. They were literally away from the front, 30 seconds from Alonso. So literally within 20 minutes, Fernando Alonso built a 30-second gap up between him and Lando Norris in P6 by managing his tyres. And obviously, I guess it was sort of hampering his teammate as well, Esteban Ocon, who had a 5-second penalty at the end of the race. So, hello and welcome to the 8th edition of the SJMoores Podcast. I just want to start this podcast by saying sorry for the lack of video version last week. It was, the footage corrupted basically. I don't know what happened. I do know what happened. I had we had FPS issues. I accidentally had the frame rate of 48. I don't know literally where that happened. I don't know where that came from, but we fixed it now. So the podcast should be good this week. The video version anyway. Obviously the audio version did well, and it was nice to have out and stuff anyway, as a backup alternative. But the video version is awesome as well, because YouTube just offers a whole new audience for the podcast, and it's also easier to follow for some people as well than any of the podcast platforms. But anyway, enough of that. Welcome to the 8th edition of the SJMoores Podcast, and today we're going to be talking about the Monaco Grand Prix. And my God, what a crazy couple hours we experienced yesterday, Sunday. Yeah, Sunday's race was just mad to think about. It's just, I mean, doing more on the racing wasn't good. It never is in Monaco. We saw in the wet, we saw a little bit more overtaking than I actually thought. So, for example, last year we only saw one overtaking the entire race. The Schumacher one on Mazepin last year. We saw a kind of overtake of for Seb and Gasly. The one that the Stroll meme interrupted in that one as well last year, but that didn't really count as an overtake because one, Seb was ahead when Gasly came out the pit lane anyway, and two is it's just more of an overcut, so there's that. But no, we had a little bit more overtaking this year, which is good. The new cars actually seemed to go around Monaco pretty well, more than they were sort of saying over the sort of build up to the weekend. I don't know whether that was because it was wet or not, but it seemed like more like normal than I thought it would do. I did a piece for F1 Unlimited this week where I looked back to last year's race, and I watched that on Friday, and obviously I watched this race yesterday, and you can see around Monaco the cars are. I mean, obviously it's obvious. It has been with the rest of regulations, but it's been way more obvious to me that the cars can follow better at Monaco. Because I watched last year's race and they couldn't follow. Got to within a second last year, and you're dropping back if anything. So that's one thing that has been fixed within regulations. It's easier to go around Monaco, which is why I guess I thought it was better. Much better than the driver said it would be going into the weekend. But anyway, enough of that. I just quick thoughts before we do get into breaking down the race. Very good weekend. Probably one of this and Spain, probably two of the better weekends of the season. Probably out there, Bahrain and Jeddah. It has not been sunny all day. It's been raining literally the entirety of the day. And as soon as I start recording, this has been it's at 7:24 p.m. right now. I had my ring light on just a minute ago before I started recording, but the sun came out just then. Now I'm being blinded by the sun. so that sort of just put me off then, but God. Okay. Where was I? Anyway, let's get into the race breakdown. If you've been watching for a while, you know the drill anyway now, but if you haven't been watching, if you are new around here, feel free to subscribe on the platform that you're watching on so you never miss an episode. If you're new around here, on my race breakdown, what I do is I go through the whole weekend from Friday to Sunday in chronological order, and then sort of round it up at the end before grading the drivers at the end too. So without further ado, let's get into the Monaco Grand Prix race breakdown. So going into the weekend, a couple of teams had upgrades, but not as many as we usually get in Monaco, because obviously we normally see the teams add like little winglets and stuff, just to add as much downforce as possible in the track, because obviously that's the way you win, right? That's the way you do well in Monaco, is just going heavy on the downforce. But then that's because of the cost cap, so teams simply, or the big teams especially, simply can't afford to put the attention in to an upgrade at Monaco when really it only counts to 25 points, or even less. If you're a Aston Martin, for example, you're not gonna make up that much difference in time by adding a winglet or two. At Monaco, you may catapult yourself into the points, but yeah, it's not too much difference. But anyway, so Mercedes were the only team with a new part that wasn't like a steering or cooling related, because obviously we saw a lot of cooling related issues in Spain, so a lot of teams have probably focused on that recently, especially going into the summer races in Europe as well, where it will be pretty warm. But no, so a lot of them, there's a different steering, but the reason why a lot of teams brought a steering upgrade is because normally at Monaco, it's like a wheel rotation extension, so you can turn the wheel a little bit further to get around those corners that are very tight, like the Lowe's hairpin, for example. Or Rascasses. Those turns are quite difficult in a modern Formula One car. So that's what the steering upgrades were for some of the teams. And the Mercedes upgrade that I was going on about, it wasn't very big either. It was just a little bit added to the front wing end plate. Obviously, as you'd expect on the driver's home race, all focus this weekend was on Charles Leclerc. Ferrari should be good run Monaco anyway. They were last year. But obviously, Charles had never finished a race in any category going into the weekend at Monaco. So there was a little bit of worry, I guess, if for all Ferrari fans and for the Tifosi out there, and obviously for the team as well. Maybe he said he don't believe in luck, but it is a little bit. It's just funny how that's the case. I guess Ricciardo, obviously, he's never had a podium in Australia, and he was in a front running car for like 5 years. That it's a similar thing to that. It's just, I guess, a lot of drivers have that sort of psyche about the home track. And then, like always in Monte Carlo, qualifying the Saturday is the most important day of the entire weekend because of how difficult it is to pass around the track. So anyway, on to Friday practice one. The session was actually halted about 20 minutes in because Mick Schumacher had a gearbox issue and had to stop, literally blocking the exit of the pit lane. Obviously, we're starting to see that meme of his car and Alonso's car both usually like this close. Someone's like kissing on the pit lane. We see that meme quite a lot on Twitter and social media, etc. At the moment. But yeah, so Mick's unfortunate gearbox issue had him literally stop right in front of the pit lane, blocking the exit and obviously causing a red flag as well. The entrance, not the exit, sorry. And then a lot of drivers were actually struggling with their car. Just sort of the ride on a lot of cars was just not good whatsoever on Friday afternoon in FP1. Lewis Hamilton and Carlos Sainz were among those, basically complaining about it the whole session on the radio, just saying the ride was horrible. And there was a lot of porpoising as well. Obviously, some teams haven't fixed that, or some teams that had fixed it. Mercedes still had a little bit of porpoising around Monaco on Friday. It didn't seem that way in the race. Obviously, they must have changed something on Saturday, going into FP3. But yeah, there was more porpoising than there had been in Spain from a lot of the teams. Alfa Romeo believed they had a car which could challenge for a podium going into the weekend, but unfortunately for them, they got off to a bad start as well. Valtteri Bottas missed the entire session. It was a potential gearbox and power unit issue. They had to remove both from the car, and then later on it was confirmed to be an MG UK issue, so it was a power unit. And then at the end of the session, Ferrari looked to have the best package. It was Leclerc in P1, Sainz in P3, Perez was P2, and he was faster than Verstappen pretty much the whole weekend, but this was the start of that we saw. And then the McLaren's had a promising start as well. Both cars looked great on Friday in FP1, and the Mercedes was struggling a little, but that was sort of just a hint to say that Mercedes and McLaren were sort of close together, and Mercedes were closer to McLaren than they were to Red Bull and Ferrari, unlike in Spain. Okay, so FP2, Daniel Ricciardo had an off 50 minutes into the session, literally taking away everything good in FP1. Unfortunately for him, he lost his front wing on the entrance to the swimming pool section, and in the rear of the car just literally went on him, and he was in the wall by the chicane before you know it. It was okay. It looked a lot worse than it actually was. I guess that's what you get with these new cars. They got a lot more of a safety feature in them than the previous ones had, because obviously the Grosjean crash as well. But yeah, that was pretty much all you can say about FP2 really. The Ferraris took the car to beat. Both of them were 3/10 faster than a faster Red Bull Perez. And then below Perez, it was literally just a free-for-all behind them. As well as the Mercedes and McLarens behind them, the AlphaTauris were actually looking really good as well. So that was interesting going into Saturday. Okay, so Saturday, FP3. The Mercedes cars were still struggling, unfortunately, not where they were in Spain, and they looked so difficult to drive as well. You could tell both Lewis and George were struggling with that car. Haas were actually looking really good as well up there with AlphaTauri. And then Alpine and Aston Martin, from what we saw over the 3 practice sessions, looked to be in the back foot of all the teams below the top 3 or 4 teams. It was we were set for an interesting qualifying, to say the least. Sergio Perez had a very, very good lap at the end of the session to go fastest, and that was that was just confirming that Checo was the better Red Bull driver over the entire weekend, and that carried on throughout the race weekend as well, obviously. And then also Lance Stroll had a little bit of a crash towards the end of the session and damaged his front wing as well. But that was it for practice 3. Anyway, so quali, obviously the most important day in Monaco. Everybody was out straight away for Q1. Literally going to be a busy 18 minutes. Everybody going out for multiple runs, just trying to, obviously, as the track evolves as well. With 10 minutes to go, it was Charles Leclerc who was the fastest, with Perez and Sainz behind him, about 3 tenths behind the Monegasque driver. Perez and Sainz literally had exactly the same time as well. We saw that a lot over the weekend with how short of a track Monaco is. We saw a lot of basically equal times, and Perez and Sainz had that in the start of Q1. Fernando Alonso, who obviously, from what Alpine shows in practice, they look like they're going to have a very bad weekend. Sometimes just having a world champion driver with the amount of experience that Fernando does in the team, he can just turn it on like that. And Fernando did that in qualifying because, wow, that Alpine was quick. And then Max Verstappen made it the top 5 results. So it was Alonso 4th, Verstappen 5th, about 10 minutes to go in Q1. It was getting a bit nervy for Lewis Hamilton. He was sat in 14th with 7 minutes to go in the session. But he did get up to P6 about a minute later. Valtteri Bottas and Mick Schumacher were both in danger. Obviously, the Alpha thought they'd have sort of maybe top of the midfield sort of car, and Haas were looking good in FP3 on Saturday. But the two of them, Bottas and Mick Schumacher, were both in danger at the with about 4 minutes left to go, the 19th and 20th respectively. Schumacher and Bottas were both out a little bit before, just sort of trying to correct their lap just in case anything goes wrong. And then Mick got him to the top 10 and Bottas got up to 10th as well. Before a red flag with 2 minutes 24 remaining, sort of shook things up a bit. There was literally just enough time to get around again, but it's going to be tight for some drivers. It was Yuki Tsunoda who damaged his wheel cover. It was a very, very premature red flag. One of the local marshals waved it, and it could have been like a double wave yellow. Just someone could run onto the track and go pick up the debris. But so that sort of disrupted qualifying, and there are a lot of drivers who were caught out by that. So the cars who are sort of most at risk after the red flag were Lando Norris, Daniel Ricciardo, and Esteban Ocon, who are 15th, 16th, and 17th. Respectively. The others around those areas were sort of expected to go out in Q1 anyway. Alex Albon and the Williams was up there in P11 at the time, but obviously with the way sometimes this works, everybody went out at that time to try and get in, and unfortunately for Alex Albon, he got caught out and he qualified P16. The order was just completely shook up. A very warm track, but unfortunately Pierre Gasly and Zhou Guanyu could not get to the checker flag and improving their lap time, and they would also be joining Albon in Q1 elimination. Then Lance Stroll, who did make the checker flag but unfortunately couldn't improve his lap, would join them alongside Nicholas Latifi. So out in Q1 it was Zhou in 20th, Latifi 19th, Stroll 18th, Gasly 17th and Alex Albon in 16th. Unfortunately for them, Hamilton, Schumacher and Bottas in 13th to 15th were lucky to get through. Literally, it was hundredths of a second between qualifying and not qualifying. Very, very close. And Pierre was doing a good job all weekend. That was a big shock for the AlphaTauri to be knocked out in Q1. And obviously we saw him with a better Sunday, but unfortunately for him, his race was over by the time Saturday came around because of just the way that Monaco is. I mean, the AlphaTauri probably were the 5th or 6th fastest car over, in practice at least. They were probably on for good points, at least Q3 potentially as well. And it's funny as well how it was Yuki Tsunoda, his teammate, who unfortunately basically made him go out in Q1. It's funny and unfortunate to think that as well. So Q2, obviously going into it, we thought it'd be very much the same. A 15-minute long session, just everyone setting laps all over the place, trying to get into the top 10 shootout. After one push lap, it was Sergio Perez on provisional pole, Sainz, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton in the top 5, and the top 3 were separated by literally 300. So it was very, very close at the start of Q2. Verstappen was 5 tenths off the leaders though. He was really struggling on Saturday, and really on Sunday he switched on a little bit, but Max was struggling to get to grips with the car on Saturday at least. With 7 minutes to go, Daniel Ricciardo and Mick Schumacher were doing a little bit of a risky strategy because they both had work to do anyway. They both weren't going to qualify into Q3, but the two of them were just sat in the garage as well when at most, the majority of the other drivers were out on the track for them pretty much the entire session. That was a bit of an interesting one. Charles Leclerc went fastest with 5 minutes left to go in the session, whilst Daniel Ricciardo set a lap with 3 minutes to go, but could only manage 11th at the time, so he was going to be very, very risky. Ahead of the final runs, against the clock in Q2, the bottom five was Schumacher, Bottas, Magnussen, Vettel, and Ricciardo. So obviously Schumacher in 15th because he hadn't improved at all. Bottas 14th, Magnussen 13th, Vettel 12th, Ricciardo 11th. Magnussen got up to 10th initially, but got knocked out unfortunately. Daniel Ricciardo and Schumacher both improved again, but unfortunately just 14th and 15th for the McLaren and the Haas driver. Joining them will be Bottas and Tsunoda in P12 and P11. Both AlphaTauris are out after having a really awesome couple of practice sessions. That was really interesting for me, but obviously the experience of Fernando Alonso and Sebastian Vettel would have got through. Mainly because of that around Monaco that happens. Sometimes it's all about the driver, and obviously about the driver it was because Vettel and Alonso both got their Alpine and the Aston Martin into Q3. They basically looked screwed after practice, but I guess when you got the experience that those two have, obviously both, there's 6 world championships between the two of them. That's mad, isn't it? Like, just thinking about it. So you've got going with Lewis and Max. That's what, 8 world championships between the top 10 and qualifying. There's 14 world championships in there. That's mental. That. Anyway, so Q3, it was more of a normal Q3 session just because teams are lacking on tyres at the moment anyway, and B, because it's only 12 minutes like it normally is. So time for 2, maybe 3 runs in that time. And obviously you're fighting for the most important pole position of the entire season at Monaco on Saturday. After one run, Charles Leclerc was the one on provisional pole. 1:11.3, what a lap from him. Only a second or so off last year's qualifying time as well, showing that these cars really, especially when it's going into the season, we expected the cars to be a lot slower than what they currently are now, so that's always nice to see. And he was 2 tenths faster than Sainz, Perez and Verstappen, who were all really close together between 2nd and 4th. Alonso, Norris, Hamilton, Russell, Vettel and Ocon made at the provisional top 10 as well. And then Red Bull tried to get 2 runs in the final 5 minutes, but nothing changes with the first one. And unfortunately for the second one, as everybody is beginning their push laps, there was a red flag. Sergio Perez lost the rear going into Portier turn 8, and went into the wall as well. And obviously Carlos Sainz went into him because he could basically, by the time he saw the yellow flag, he couldn't do anything about it. He was already at speed on his push lap. Yeah, so Carlos Sainz made contact with Perez. I might have ignored the yellow flag, but they didn't investigate that. Going around Portier and caused a blockade, which brought out the red flag and ended qualifying. We actually saw Fernando Alonso in the wall at turn 5 as well. Obviously on his push lap as well, but some drivers did actually get a push lap away in Norris and Russell, who jumped Alonso for P5 and 6 respectively, and then Charles Leclerc was improving on his lap as well. He could have gotten the 110s with the way he was going. I think it was 4 or 5 tenths up at the time, but when the red flag was caused. But unfortunately after the Sainz Perez collision, but anyway, so that set up a grid. Obviously Charles Leclerc was on pole, Carlos Sainz next to him on the front row, Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen Red Bull locking out the second row, then Lando in P5, George in P6, Fernando and Lewis in the fourth row of the grid, and then Seb and Ocon making up the 5th row of the grid, 9th and 10th, and it was Tsunoda 11th, Bottas 12th, Magnussen 13th, Ricciardo 14th, Schumacher 15th, Albon 16th, Gasly 17th, Stroll 18th, 19th for Latifi, and then 20th was Zhou Guanyu for the grid on Sunday. Anyway, going into the race, one word describes the start of this race: chaos. The trip to the grid, done, normal. The national anthem, done, normal. And then just before the race was due to start, some rain came. It was spitting. And before we knew it, the start was delayed. And we know why now. It was because there's a power fault with the light system. Obviously, the 5 red lights need to go out to start the race. And there's a power fault with that one, which is why we didn't actually get a standing start midway through the race either. Another reason, other than the fact there was a dry line and a wet line on the pit straight as well. But no, so it turns out that was broken, and obviously we didn't know that until the time. We didn't know that until Ted's notebook. I don't think I've seen many people talk about it online either. Unfortunately, there was a fault with the light system, which delayed it for a bit, and obviously the heavy rain came. The heavy rain came. That was just at the time when it was delayed, it wasn't heavy yet, but the race director just delayed the start by 20 minutes or so, just to make sure that was the lights would be ready, but they weren't ready in time. And then the safety car went out to sort of lead the drivers out. Went out for a couple of formation laps just to see if it was ready to race or not. But the rain literally only got worse, and then the red flags were thrown, delaying the start of the race for even longer. Because unfortunately, if the lights weren't broken, we would have literally had about 15 laps of racing before a red flag was thrown. So we could have got a completely different outcome if that wasn't the case. The racing eventually got away under a rolling start under the safety car, obviously, an hour and 5 minutes later than it should have done. 3:05 Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time, and obviously 4:05 French time. And then when it hit 3:05 or 4:05 over in Monaco, it was the start of the 2 hour window to complete a racing. So as the race started under the safety car, the full wets have to be the starting tyre, so everybody was in the full wets, even if it wasn't the conditions as the way it worked. So it kind of was at the very start anyway. Drivers were told to expect more rain at the end of the race, but not for about 20-30 minutes or so. And then under the safety car in the first lap of the race, we saw Nick Latifi literally go straight into the barrier at the Lowe's hairpin. Just a ton of understeer, couldn't turn the car at all. And when he on the radio, we saw a little snippet of him saying the car literally wouldn't turn, but he was able to get out of the wall, obviously, and carry on with the lap, although he did come in at the end of the lap to repair his front wing. We also saw Lance Stroll have a right rear puncture as he hit the barrier going through Massenet. Both came in at the end of the first lap. Obviously, Latifi with the new front wing and Lance Stroll with the new tyres. And then a safety car came in at the end of lap 2, and then obviously as lap 3 started, Charles Leclerc led them away, and everybody's struggling with grip. Literally everybody was struggling with grip at this time. There was so many dark patches on the track. We saw Leclerc literally almost lose it as he started the pack off, coming out under the safety car. So at the end of lap 3, obviously the first lap without a safety car, we actually saw Pierre Gasly come in for intermediates just to sort of risk it. Obviously, there's nothing to lose, and the track was drying up, and obviously it wasn't raining anymore either. And then Lance Stroll and Latifi came in 2 for the second lap in the row. So Gasly, Stroll and Latifi 18th, 19th and 20th in the race after they went to the pit lane, all for intermediate tyres to try and basically just change their fortunes. Obviously, for Gasly, it was a little bit more than the other two, but we'll go into that in a minute. At first lap time-wise, it wasn't too big of a difference between the intermediate and the wets. Obviously, Charles was saying fastest laps on the wets, and Gasly was about 5 or 6 tenths behind him. But after a while, we saw that the intermediate tyre was the one to be on. Lewis Hamilton pretty much confirmed this on lap 5 when he said it was slippery, but will dry pretty quick. And then Pierre Gasly actually did a lock-up on lap 5 as well, going down into the New York chicane, sort of struggling on the inters, but he was still lapping incredibly fast at the time. Mick Schumacher was the fourth person to come in for inters at the time as well on lap 5, as Esteban Ocon actually managed to get past Sebastian Vettel, who messed up at Saint Devote, and went into the to the runoff area to turn around. So on lap 6 as well, we actually saw Gasly's first fastest lap of the race starting to fly on those inters, now making up positions, or he was bound to make up positions by the time everybody came in for those inters as well. And speaking about coming in for the inters, it was Vettel and Tsunoda who did that on lap 6 as well. Those leading the pack had to wait, literally because they could get caught out if they came in too early or too late, unfortunately for them. But the ones at the back, they had the they had the freedom to do that. Hence, we saw all the Aston Martins, the Alpines, the Williams come in for the and the Haas's coming in for the intermediate tyres. So on lap 9, we saw George Russell start to chase down Lando Norris, who he was faster than. But unfortunately for George, he got it all wrong at the Nouvelle chicane and managed to lock up. Was almost too close to Lando, I guess, in that way. And unfortunately for him, going straight on at the Nouvelle chicane. And then by the time lap 10 came around, Pierre Gasly was literally just directly on the back of Zhou Guanyu and Alex Albon. He was so much quicker than those guys in the way. He made like a 5 or 6 second gap like that. Did Gasly, lapping so much quicker on those intermediate tyres. And he got past one of those guys as well on lap 11 when he got past Albon, who did the same with Vettel, going wrong at Sandevort and going into the runoff area, who was up to P14, and then Vettel actually got past Albon 2 at the time, so unfortunately for Alex, he was down to P16. Zhou Guanyu messed up that Nouvelle chicane on that lap as well, lap 11, and he had to give up, and he was due to give up the place to Gasly, unfortunately, just for the way the rules work. He didn't initially, and he didn't by the time Gasly actually overtook him, because he sent it down the inside of Zhou at Mirabeau, the turn, but just before the downhill section to the hairpin, turn 5. It was a lovely move from Gasly, and he actually saw it in helmet cam as well. It looked awesome in helmet cam. It was a really good move, and I think I tweeted out at the time, I was like Pierre, and then just did like the clapping emoji, because that was an awesome move, and it looked really cool around Monaco, the helmet cam as well too. And then Zhou Guanyu, obviously, he would have had to give up the place anyway, so it doesn't really matter to him. But it was nice to see an overtake at Monaco. On lap 13, we saw a bit of a train between Gasly, Zhou and Vettel at this point, on the back of Ricciardo in P12, who was on the wets. Obviously, Zhou was on the inters. Obviously, Zhou was on the wets as well, but I don't know why. But unfortunately, Seb couldn't get past him at the time. Just his inters weren't as warm as Pierre's was, or were. But yeah, so Ricciardo actually made a massive mistake at the end of lap 12 at Rascasse, which is why they were on the back of Ricciardo as well. And then Pierre actually got a great exit out of the new chicane on lap 13, going down the inside of Ricciardo into the swimming pool section. Awesome move from Pierre. 2 overtakes at the start of the race in the wet. We didn't see very many more, but obviously there's more than last year already by the time lap 13 came around. On lap 15, we saw Carlos Sainz set the fastest lap. He made a call to skip the inters completely and go straight from extreme wets to slicks. And that looked a bit bold at the time, but by the way, time the race was going, he looked to have the better of the strategies. Lewis Hamilton pitted on lap 16 for inters. That was just to cover off Pierre Gasly, whom he could have even got potentially if he didn't come in sooner or later. Gasly was on the back of Magnussen and Bottas before you know it, and he set another fastest lap on pit lap 16. On lap 17, saw the first of the front runners come in, Sergio Perez on for inters, and this, quite frankly, was winning the race. He was into clear air just in front of George Russell, and it looked like he might jump Carlos Sainz. Sainz was told to come into inference at the time, but if he did that, his race would have been completely ruined. And obviously, he was dead set on going from straight to slicks anyway. So he said he doesn't think it was right and stayed out. And then Lando Norris came in also on lap 17 just to cover off Hamilton as well. So Gasly, unfortunately, he looked like his time going up the field was over. Mick Schumacher came on the radio and said, "I think my front wing is broken," also on lap 17, but we didn't actually find out why. This is a mad lap, by the way. So much happening at this time. We didn't actually know why, but obviously he had to come in for another front wing. So that was his race pretty much ruined, unfortunately. And then Lewis Hamilton at this point as well, his first lap on the new inters, and he was right on the back of Esteban Ocon. He went for a move into turn 1. Esteban Ocon turned in on him and damaged his front wing end plate. Obviously the new part that Mercedes had just put on the car, so I don't think they would have been very happy about that. But yeah, unfortunately for Ocon, he did turn in on Lewis, so he got a 5-second time penalty, but a lot later in the race than you think it would have been. So yeah, Lewis obviously still not past Esteban Ocon on lap 18 at the time, as Sebastian Vettel, as Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen both come in for intermediate tyres. Obviously, Sainz is staying out. And at the time as well, Sergio Perez jumped Charles Leclerc, and Sky didn't actually make a big deal out of this whatsoever, obviously, because Perez took the net lead of the race at the time, but they just sort of passed off at the time, and I was like, okay, that's a bit weird. But anyway, enough of that. But I guess they might have just missed it or forgot that Leclerc was the lead of the race by the time that happened. I'm not sure, to be honest with you. But yeah, so the positioning for Perez was crucial when it put him in the lead of the race, or the net lead of the race at the time. Anyway, on lap 20, Sergio was going so fast, literally it was only a 7-second gap to Sainz. So even if he wanted to come in, he couldn't. He had to literally commit to going on to slicks at this point. Obviously, because Sergio still had to pit for the slicks as well, as did Leclerc, as did Verstappen. On lap 20, Lewis Hamilton was still stuck behind Esteban Ocon. I think Ocon really annoyed him in this race because, God, it was... I mean, Alonso did a good job as well, annoying the 7-time world champion, but he did not have a good time with the Alpines in this race. And then, yes, Hamilton still behind Ocon, and then Ricciardo, Zhou, Latifi came in for slicks at that time as well, after Mick Schumacher, by the way, when he did break his front wing, he was the first to come in for slicks. I did miss that. But yeah, so Mick was the first one to come in for slicks. He came in for the hards on lap 18 when Leclerc and Verstappen came in, and and then Ricciardo, Zhou and Latifi joined him on the hard tyre on lap 20. 20. At the end of lap 20, obviously Lewis still behind Esteban Ocon. We saw him go for a move on the outside of Raskas. Unfortunately for him, Ocon did hold off. And we also saw Bottas and Magnussen come in for hards at the end of the lap 2. Lap 21, this was the big one. Carlos Sainz came in for the slicks for the hard tyres. But Leclerc did too. That was mad. Literally just after him, there was a double stack for Ferrari. And they changed their mind too late. We saw Charles drive into the pits and say, stay out. His engineer was shouting at him. And obviously he was like, no, like Ferrari screwed over Charles. Why do they pit him for inters? And then why didn't they just do the same strategy that Carlos was on? Literally, probably Charles would have won the race if that wasn't the case. You know, the fact that they brought him in for inters and then literally 2 laps later, it was like, okay, no, we're going back onto the hards now. And they wanted to keep him out for a little bit longer. And then at this time as well, Sky finally noticed that Perez is actually likely to take the race lead. It took him a couple of laps, but yeah, we saw that, and we also saw Kevin Magnussen retire on lap 21. I think it was a water leak for him, so similar to the Mercedes issue in Spain. And then George Russell came for hards on that lap as well, lap 21, actually managing to jump Lando Norris at the time as well. Here we are, lap 22. Sergio Perez comes in. Carlos Sainz at the moment is the leader of the race. Will Sergio Perez take the lead of the race? Yes, he will. Yes, he will indeed. And Leclerc was jumped by Verstappen too as the 2 Red Bulls came in for the double stack. The 2 Red Bulls had literally jumped a Ferrari each, going up to P1 and P3 respectively. And Charles Leclerc, in the space of a couple minutes, went from the race lead to P4, unfortunately for Charles, and I feel so sorry for him, man. Ferrari have got to sort the strategy out. Strategy could have potentially lost Seb World Championship in 2018. Ferrari's strategists just aren't as good as the Red Bull and Mercedes ones, apparently. That's just the way it is. So it turns out that Sainz and Leclerc actually were held up by back markers. I think it was the Williams of Latifi and Albon. I think Albon actually ignored 29 blue flag just like either whether it's the flash on the screen or him being told or him being the manual blue flag that you see from the marshals on the side of the track as well. Like Albon, I don't know. He said to sort of defend himself that he was faster than Charles at the time. Being held up by the 2 Williams and also the Ferrari strategy just did unfortunately cost them their positions at the time. Anyway, lap 23, Mick Schumacher and Zhou Guanyu were tangling at Raskas. They didn't actually tap after Zhou sent it down the inside. It was very risky. They made contact, but Zhou, 1, got a move done, and 2, Mick, I don't think had any lasting damage either, so it was okay, but that was a pretty interesting one. But Zhou actually made a move. Obviously, he got overtaken 4 times in this race as well, so he had a very eventful race when it comes to wheel-to-wheel battles. So Zhou Guanyu went up to P16, and then Alonso and Ocon also came in around this time as well to make sure that everybody was in on the hard tyres by lap 23. And then also just after Schumacher and Zhou tangled at Raskas in lap 23, Sainz and Perez actually right on the back of them. And by the time lap 24 started, we literally almost saw Sainz lose it and go into the wall. Carlos was still lucky to even be in the Grand Prix after he almost lost it after going over that damp patch. But man, it was a great save. Touch the damp patch, and then literally just the car just went like that on him. And he was lucky to sort of, I think Martin said that it was his dad's rally experience that would have helped him with that, which is true. And also, I think Crofty made a joke saying about Courtois, obviously the Champions League final before, Courtois having a really good night, basically winning Real Madrid the Champions League final on Saturday. Crofty made that joke about Courtois, but yeah, what a save from Sainz, obviously almost nearly losing it and going out the Grand Prix. But yeah, I thought it was interesting, to say the least. And then Verstappen and Leclerc were literally right on the back of Sainz and Perez at the end of this lap. So all 4 cars were so close. It was awesome to see them running so close. Literally all within about a second of each other. Really cool. Lap 26 saw Alex Albon get a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. He also unfortunately had a right tyre puncture at the chicane as well on lap 26, and he literally just dove straight back into the pit for medium tyres. So unfortunately, Albon's race was just over already. He was probably going to lose that to his teammate Latifi at the time as well. And then George Russell actually in lap 26 was second fastest laps and getting closer to the front 4, so he could have potentially challenged if there wasn't a red flag, which the Mick Schumacher crash brought out on lap 26 at the swimming pool chicane. He got out of it okay, and I was so happy to see that, because at the time when I saw it, I was like, oh my god, please, I was shaking, like worried him it was okay, because it looked so bad, but especially when the car just split into 2. But I think Martin Brundle was saying because of since the Grosjean crash, a lot of the a lot of the incidents are looking a lot more bigger because I think it's a safer way. There's something with the safety testing of this car. I think they break apart more easily. I don't know what it is, but he was saying that, especially when the gearbox broke as well. I think it's to prevent what happened to Roman happening again, and the fire hazard, fire hazard just going like, okay, yeah, like that. I think that was the plan of it. Unfortunately, I'm not too technical with with this yet, but either way, I was so happy to see Mick walk out of that car. And then a safety car was initially called, followed by a red flag on lap 30. It's not only clear the debris, but also repair the barrier as well. So yeah, the car was lifted off lap 29, then a safety car, and then the red flag was, I don't know, what's the word? Flew. The red flag was lifted. The red flag was announced on lap 30. Just saying, I forgot my words then. Yeah, the red flag came on lap 30 of the race. So it took about 20 minutes before we actually got underway again. It was announced that it'd be a rolling restart, like it was a rolling start, because obviously the lights were still messed up, and obviously we didn't know that at the time, and also because it should have been a standing start if there wasn't the light problem, but also if there wasn't damp patches down the side of the track as well. Obviously, if you're on one side of the grid, and you got more of an advantage than the other side of the grid, unfortunately. But yeah, I thought it was unfair, but if the light system was broken at the time, like Ted Kravitz says it was, then obviously there's a reason for it. But yeah, so it was looking like the race would time out. We've not seen that for a while. So it was actually the first race to time out without finishing completing the lap distance. Obviously, ignoring Spa last year. It was actually at Spa. It was Spa 2001, the last time we saw a race fully timed out, rather than completing the race distance. So under the red flag, we saw some cars change to medium tyres to try and get away better in a safety car, and came back into the pit lane to try and sort of jump a car potentially, maybe on the hard tyres. Obviously, harder tyre, more time to warm it up. Actually, that's the way it works. But yeah, so it was Perez, Verstappen, Russell, Alonso, Hamilton, Ocon, Tsunoda, Zhou and Latifi, who came in for medium tyres. And just in case they needed time out because they didn't get a full race distance done, 3/4 distance was needed for full points after Spa. They changed the rules, and I think a third was needed for a third. I think a third of the race was needed for half points. Obviously after they're controversial, but we didn't have anything near that in Spa last year. But anyway, so the red flag obviously was done at lap 31. We got back to racing, and on lap 32 obviously it was a safety car running restart. At lap 32 the safety car came in and we got away. Sergio Perez got away well. There were no moves really, but he did make a mistake on the new tyres for Mirabeau. Unfortunately for him, that would sort of cost him towards the end of the race, kind of. But yeah, Sergio, especially on a brand new set of medium tyres as well. There was thought, the doubt maybe the medium would even get to the end of the race. You need to manage it, as we saw from Fernando Alonso. But unfortunately for Perez, the lock up into turn 5 did cost him a little bit. By the time the end of the race came, but he was still leading, so it didn't really matter. And also around Monaco, it's not like it really matters. Obviously, if it was another race, he probably would have got overtaken, but that's Monaco for you. But anyway, lap 34, about a lap after the restart began, we saw Fernando Alonso going so slow on purpose to try and try and basically just manage his tyres, but he went to the extreme, going so about a couple of seconds a lap slower than everybody else, starting to hold up Lewis Hamilton and sort of just setting for P7 as well. Fernando was. Lewis was on the back of him like straight away, and honestly, Fernando is just so funny. But bear this in mind in a minute. The gap at the time from Fernando to Lando Norris was 1.3 seconds in P6. On that 35, Esteban Ocon finally got penalised for the Lewis Hamilton crash. Or collision, I guess, not really a crash. He got a 5-second time penalty on lap 35, so it took him, a fair bit of time. Obviously, with the red flags are about 45 minutes to about 45 minutes just to penalise Ocon. On lap 36, it was confirmed that there wasn't enough time to do 77 laps, so the clock instead just showed 35 minutes of the race left, and obviously one lap as well. Once the time hit 0 minutes, on 33 minutes, we saw Ted Kravitz noticed that Lewis Hamilton changed his race helmet inside the red flag. Obviously, he had the sort of marbly colour looking relic special edition purpley helmet at the start of the race, but he went back to his yellow helmet when the red flag started or finished after the red flag, and with 31 minutes to go, we saw the gap between Alonso and Norris now 15 seconds, so about 10 minutes or so it's grown 15 seconds. And we also saw DRS enabled as well, about 31 minutes in, but it's not like it really matters when Monaco anyway. 24 minutes in, obviously we're getting close to the end of the race now. It did not much of the race left, unfortunately, but it was a pretty good weekend all in all, and it was very wild as well, as you know. And then 24 minutes into the race, like I was saying earlier, behind Fernando Alonso, everybody was within a second of each other. There are 13 cars, all on the same part of the track. I don't know if you've seen the meme. I'll put it on the screen now if you haven't seen it. It's literally just there's the front runners, and then Lando and George on one half of Monaco, and then on the track in Monte Carlo, obviously. And on the other side, it's literally just got it's got the rest of them. It's got 13 cars all bunched together. It was just honestly, just and then because of that as well, the race was hitting a bit of a low, unfortunately. Lando Norris and George Russell were just in a world of their own. They were P5 and P6. They were literally away from the front, 30 seconds from Alonso. So literally within 20 minutes, Fernando Alonso built a 30-second gap up between him and Lando Norris in P6 by managing his tyres. And obviously, I guess it was sort of hampering his teammate as well, Esteban Ocon, who had a 5-second penalty at the end of the race. With about 20 minutes or so left in the race, we got Lewis Hamilton coming on the radio saying that he wanted to jump Fernando Alonso if they had to stop for the blue flags at the end of the race. Obviously, with where they are, and especially with where they are on the track as well, the front runners we're going to catch him by the end of the race especially. So if Lewis would basically just make sure we jump this guy, obviously because I didn't know whether it was Alonso or Ocon at the time. He said this guy, but he was if we had to stop to allow under a blue flag to stop to allow Perez through per se, let's just let's try and jump Alonso at a time because he's annoying me. I thought it was really funny. And we also saw Fernando Alonso finally pick up the pace as the cars were starting to separate. About 15 minutes or so left in the race. Zhou Guanyu actually was lapping faster than most at this time as well, and he went for a move on Yuki Tsunoda on the Alpha Tauri, the new chicane. He got alongside him. He just got out of sorts, just literally completely alongside him, and before you know it, he almost turned in on him, did Zhou Guanyu. But another great save, probably even better than the Sainz save, I think. He actually managed to correct it just in time and managed to obviously just slamming the brakes going down into the Nouveau chicane, completely missing it as well, just going straight off into the runoff area. But unfortunately for Zhou, he lost a lot of position at a time, went down to the very back of the race, unfortunately for him. But at least it's not A, in Tsunoda and getting penalised for it, or B, in a wall. So I guess at the time that was a pretty good save, but it did cost him, unfortunately, did it for Zhou. Part of the reason why Zhou actually fell all the way down to last is because actually Alex Albon retired the car with 15 minutes or so left to go, unfortunately for him. I don't know what happened though, I don't know why he retired, but I guess with him he's he was quite far off the rest of them at the time as well. Unfortunately for Alex, obviously he stopped more times than anybody else as well. But yeah, unfortunately for Alex, that was his race over, retiring the car. About 40 minutes left to go. 12 minutes left to go, 12 minutes on the clock. We saw Sergio Perez start to struggle with the tyres now. Obviously, he locked up a Mirabeau about 20 minutes before on the restart. And obviously, he's normally good at tyre management, but even him, he's a genius at it, and he was struggling after the lockup. Obviously, his tyres are graining, and there are questions whether the medium would even last that long anyway. That also meant that Carlos Sainz is starting to get a little bit closer to him, but he was about 1.2 seconds or so with 12 minutes left to go, and by the time about a minute later came, about 11 minutes left on the clock, he was literally half a second down on Perez, and so the gap was 0.5 seconds or so with 11 minutes left to go, and he was setting up for an interesting end to the race essentially. Leclerc and Verstappen were actually lapping faster than him as well, so the three of them were all within DRS range of each other with about 10 minutes or so left to go. And obviously Perez is doing a great job holding up, and obviously we saw we've seen with Monaco in the past, we saw with many of the Lewis wins, we saw with the Daniel Ricciardo win in 2018 especially, we saw that if you position the car well, you sit in the middle of the track, you can win a race to Monaco in a very by lapping a couple of seconds, maybe a second and a half slower lap, you can still go about getting past at Monaco. I mean, Fernando, that just shows the way the track is at the moment. That unfortunately for Fernando, unfortunately for the rest of the pack, they just couldn't get past Fernando with the way the track is. But it just shows that you've got to be a couple of seconds lap faster to get past. To even try and move at Monaco. So with about 9 minutes left to go in the Grand Prix, plus a lap, obviously, we saw Carlos Sainz actually have a look down the inside of Sergio Perez at the Nouveau chicane, but unfortunately just wasn't quick enough to make a move. Obviously, like I said, you'd have to pay for it. We saw Yuki Tsunoda go deep at turn 1 as well. Obviously, a lot of drivers making the mistake with the very, very heavy braking zone that Santafor is. Sonoda went into the runoffs area as well to turn around and obviously do the 3-point turn that everybody does down there. And unfortunately, he went down to last in the race and at this point as well, his tyres are done, so he comes in for new softs with 7 minutes left to go. Does Yuki Tsunoda. And at this time, it looks like Carlos Sainz seems faster than ever out of Portier. He looks like he could actually maybe even get Sergio Perez at this time, going out of Portier, down into the tunnel, going down to the Nivelle chicane. You saw that Carlos was sort of angling his car for the move, but some great positioning from Sergio Perez. Again, just taking up the middle of that track, not conceding at all. Obviously, for him, it'd be his first win at Monaco. It's one of the historic tracks, probably the most. Actually, probably is the most historic track on the entire grid. It's probably one that the drivers want to win. I saw a tweet from Aldas just now on Twitter saying, if you're a driver, what three would you win? And he said Monza, Silverstone, and Monaco. I'd probably say the same. I mean, definitely Silverstone. Obviously, I'm British. Me, I do quite like Italian culture. I've got a couple of classic Italian football shirts now. I love Sanremo. I love all these Italian things. The national anthem's great as well. The Italian national anthem is awesome. But I probably would pick Monza as well. I prefer Monza a little bit to Imola anyway, but Imola's a great track too. Probably Monaco because it's the most historic one. So I'd probably pick the same three. But no, so you think Formula 1, you think Monaco, so it's one of those out there, so it's probably would have been a lot more to Checo than any other Grand Prix victory. But yeah, so great positioning from Checo, and basically that was Sainz's best chance to win the race, in my opinion anyway, with about 7 minutes or so left to go in the race. On lap 6, we actually saw the two cars almost crash. Actually, Carlos Sainz was just a little bit too close to Sergio Perez at the Lowe's hairpin, almost going into the back of him. It's not. It's like the Grand Hotel hairpin now. I think that's what it's called now. I can't remember, but the hairpin is this. It's the same corner. It's got tons of different names, but so going into the hotel, the hairpin, Sainz literally just like, it looked like he was about to go in the back of Perez. I think Brundle said that he might try and go for a move like on the concrete bit, just sort of launch the car over there. Some drivers do. We saw Mick do that last year and get past Mazepin doing that. But yeah, so Sainz was so close to Perez, almost crashing into him. They actually had to like correct the car and unfortunately lose time, and sort of Verstappen was on the back of him quickly. Obviously, Sainz was slapping a little bit faster than Max, and obviously Max was struggling as well, so he managed to manage the time with Verstappen anyway. But yeah, it was the first of a couple of mistakes towards the end of the race for Sainz that he wasn't going to win the race anyway, but obviously you're in a position, you're going to try and drive as aggressive as you can without crashing at the time to try and win the race. It's just going to happen, isn't it? So, with about 4 minutes or so left in the Grand Prix, we saw the front runners on the back of the back markers now. Sergio Perez had to be really careful at this point in the race as well, because, you can use him to gain an advantage, but it could also lose position, so making go horribly wrong with the blue flag. So, you just got to be so careful. And he got past Joe Latifi very well. Everything okay, and he looked in control with about 2 minutes left. Very Ricciardo 2018-esque performance from Perez here. It was an awesome, an awesome winning drive. It's not American football. It was some winning. It was it's not like a winning drive like it is driving to the end zone. It's a winning. Yeah, it is a winning drive. I guess I'm talking waffle here, but an awesome winning drive from Sergio Perez, fully in control. And yeah, I mean, using the track position to lead him to victory, and for him especially, an excellent strategic call from Red Bull at the time as well. Like, you have to give it to them. They're really good with that kind of thing. We've seen it time and time again over the last couple of years, especially Red Bull trying something out of the box with the strategy. Obviously, when they were sort of trading Mercedes and a Ferrari in the start of the hybrid era, where they were the third fastest team at the time, they did have to sort of try and invest in this to try and get up there, the two of them. Especially 17-18 wise, Red Bull had a couple of off years. 16-17 wise, they had to sort of be very very sort of Red Bull, over that time when Lewis was winning like his fifth, sixth, World Championships, Red Bull had to be creative with their strategy to try and get some race wins and podiums at a time. So yeah, it was obviously now they're a bit of a force in Formula 1 with the way the regulations have swung over the past couple of years, being massively helped out by the fact that the 2021 was basically carry over from 2020, and they developed the car very well towards the end of 2020 as well. Obviously, we saw Max win Abu Dhabi in 2020. But yeah, so for Red Bull, just in general, an awesome weekend for him. And as well, I think it's a bit of like a screw you from Sergio at the time as well. Because last week, I was complaining about it a lot, saying that I feel like obviously it's very it's too early to have preferential treatment for drivers. Now, if Checo had won that race and won this race as well, he'd be ahead of Charles Leclerc in the championship, and then you have a completely different problem on your hands. So it's just Red Bull are a little bit lucky that they did do that, because then it's like, oh, hang on a minute, and we've got to let Checo and Max compete here. We can't But it is interesting, what would have happened if Perez did win in Spain last week. That is, it has a whole different meaning now that he's gone and done that, and Red Bull have got the advantage in the championship they have on Ferrari at the moment. Okay, so going into the final lap of the race, Carlos Sainz unfortunately had fallen out of DRS range, gave it everything he could so he wouldn't get Sergio Perez, and Sergio Perez had done it. He took the checker flag and won the Monaco Grand Prix. Sainz unfortunately second like last year. And Max Verstappen, obviously, he won last year's Monaco Grand Prix. He came third, completing the podium. But yeah, what a race. I really enjoyed it. Just sort of going over my thoughts in general, really. Unfortunately, I said about the Esteban Ocon penalty. Unfortunately, he kind of got screwed over by the Alonso extreme tyre management, because it took him out of the top 10. Sebastian Vettel got elevated into P10. Obviously, he was P11 before. And also Pierre Gasly finished ahead of him as well. But unfortunately for Pierre, he finished P11. So it's so close to the points after starting P17, and with the awesome strategy call to come in and on the inters at the time and set the fastest laps and get past the couple of cars that he did. So yeah, a great little drive from Pierre. But unfortunately, I think Lewis and Lando coming in at the time sort of did halt him. So unfortunately for Pierre, he could only manage P11 in the race. And it was a great drive from George Russell as well, getting past Lando Norris, obviously jumping him, going onto the slick tyres for P5 as well. And George, if there wasn't the red flag, George was, we saw George start to catch the front runners before the red flag was brought out. That was an interesting one. Maybe he could have, he probably would have come fifth, but he would have been a little bit closer to them than he was at the end of the race, I think, because George was taking fastest laps all over the place. But yeah, so overall thoughts on the Monaco Grand Prix, probably the third or fourth best race of the season. Australia and Imola were much worse. Jeddah was probably the best one. But I guess with the Jeopardy, Bahrain was really good as well. Obviously, getting the fight between Max and Charlotte we did get in Bahrain, and Jeddah was really cool. Australia was alright. Imola was probably the worst one, potentially. I don't know. Either way, Imola and Australia were the two not great ones. But Spain and Monaco, like I said, I was surprised at the start of the podcast. I said that I didn't think they'd be very good, and sometimes you get that in Formula 1. Sometimes the bad tracks do have a good couple races, and obviously it's been up to chaos the last couple of races, and Ferrari have been sort of at the tail point of that chaos. They could have had two races. They've been the fastest car the last two races. Unfortunately, they've only finished 3 of the 4 cars possible at the time, and only one podium finish. Actually, thinking about it, unfortunately for Ferrari, the big swing with Red Bull points wise in this championship is mental. And for Charles, I do worry that the Ferrari just looked at the fastest car. I do worry for him, saying that we'll look back at like we did with Seb, thinking Ferrari failed him in a chance for a world championship, because that's the way it's looking right now, unfortunately. I think Carlos is out of it. Perez has still got a chance really in the championship. It is like a 3-horse race at the moment. Like he's only a couple of points ahead of Charles at the moment. But if Perez wins Baku again like he did last year, I know obviously a lot happened to Baku, so that's the reason why he did win in Baku. But even so, I think it was just interesting. I do worry for Charles overall, but that's my initial thought on the Monaco Grand Prix. Also, one thing as well is please keep Monaco on the calendar. I know some people don't like it, but it's got to stay. It's the thought of F1 without any Monaco. It's like, especially for for the locals who don't follow F1. Some of them do tune in for the Monaco Grand Prix. It's a thing. It's like, some locals watch Silverstone, for example, or it's a worldwide known event. You ask some Americans who don't watch F1 or don't have anything. They'll probably will know about the Monaco Grand Prix from seeing tons of celebrities. And we saw Russell Wilson there. We saw Serena Williams there. It's a very Instagrammable place. It's just like the thought of Monaco not being there. Celebrities will hate it. Sponsors and stuff as well. And I know there's a lot. It's a very traditional thing, and F1 do want to change some things like having their own race direction or TV direction. Having all these things. They want their own race direction as well. Obviously, this is a whole different story. I'll probably talk about that in a couple of weeks' time if there's some more report about that. But yeah, I think it's interesting for obviously the deal for next season is not signed yet. At the time, we're not going to have a Monaco Grand Prix next year, and I think we probably will do. Obviously, Charles Leclerc being, if Charles wins the World Championship or does very well this season, there's going to be questions why there isn't a Monaco Grand Prix. Like, is having Max Verstappen single-handedly brought F1 back to Zandvoort. If Max wasn't a thing, we wouldn't be racing at Zandvoort right now, and that's facts. If Checo wasn't a thing, I doubt I'd be racing in Mexico right now, because that's another one that after Perez came into the sport, we've got the Mexican Grand Prix come in. It's these sort of things like if. For example, with Ferrari, Kimi Raikkonen never ever got a home race. I know there aren't any real tracks in Scandinavia. If you do want to learn more about that, then do watch my my video on it. It's done quite well over the past. But yeah, just why are there no Nordic Grand Prix? I can't even remember what it's called. But yeah, there's a video I've got on the channel about it. Feel free to watch that. It is really in depth about why there's no Grand Prix in Scandinavia, or the Nordic nations as it's officially called. But no, anyway, so just going back to the Monaco Grand Prix, I think it'd be a travesty just not to have it on the calendar. I mean, come on, Paul Ricard's on the calendar. I like Paul Ricard more than most. We've had a couple of good races there. 2019 was a washout, but 2018 and 2021's races were really, really good. So I'm a bit of a fan more than most. But yeah, I just places like Spain is still on the calendar, and I know Spain's really good for testing and stuff, and is a historic track, but that might be going soon. Like, you never know. The Qatar race wasn't that great, but he's got like a multi-year contract. They think 30 races is possible. I don't think 30 races is possible. There's no way they're going to do that. They're going to have too much. Unless they employ multiple staff members and they do 15 races each a season. There's no way There's no way some of the mechanics and stuff are going to do that. It's going to cost way too much as well, thinking about it, especially with the way the world's going at the moment. Unfortunately, with all the the price inflation and stuff, even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, it's got to an astronomical level right now. It's just interesting. They're not going to do 30 races, but Monaco has to be on the calendar just for every reason I've listed. The driver said that they do want some changes to the track. I noticed in the press conferences they said they want more of an overtaken area. I don't know where they're going to do that. Obviously, there are some different layouts to the Monaco circuit. Obviously, FE had an older layout. Obviously, it wasn't very good. That's why they changed it to the F1 layout. But there are you can potentially do some things about it. Obviously, they're doing that sort of renovation work down by where Portier would be as well. There's a lot of building sites and stuff down there at the moment. Anyway, there is room for change at Monaco. We'll see, but it has to stay on the calendar, surely. Thank you. I've gone about this and on about this enough, but yeah, it has to stay on the calendar, please. It's a really good weekend. Yeah, please. I mean, personally, I'd been off Singapore and keep Monaco, because they are obviously, we've got many street races now. Obviously, Miami, I get why it's there, but I've completely, speaking about good races, I've completely blanked Miami. I completely forgot that was even a thing. I've done Australia Imola. I've just completely forgot Miami was even a thing. Miami was a pretty good race as well. God, wow. It's been such a decent season. Obviously, not as good as last season, but we've not got a big championship battle at the moment and stuff but it's still been a pretty good season. Racing wise anyway, you've sort of had a dodgy start. We're hitting some really good tracks at the moment, so we'll see whether the regulations are really, really good or not. Monaco is a positive step for that, but I completely forgot about Miami. Anyway, let's get into grading the drivers before I waffle on for any longer. Okay, so let's just go back through the race result before I do it. Obviously, Sergio Perez won the race, and then Carlos Sainz and Verstappen running up the podium. Charles Leclerc was in P4, really unfortunate for him, unfortunately. Of course it is unfortunate, but you know what I mean. Russell and Norris P6, P5 and P6, we've gone through them already. Alonso P7, holding up everyone to get P7, but I mean, I admire it. Lewis Hamilton P8, Valtteri Bottas P9, and Sebastian Vettel P10. finishing out the points. And then it was Pierre Gasly in 11th, Ocon in 12th, so falling 3 spaces because of the penalty. Ricciardo in 13th, Lance Stroll in 14th, Nicholas Latifi 15th, 16th for Zhou Guanyu, and 17th for Yuki Tsunoda. And obviously Alex Albon and Mick Schumacher and Kevin Magnussen did not finish the Grand Prix. Okay, so we're going to go through and grade all the drivers. We're going to go for the weekend this time because obviously qualifying is such a big, factor in the race result in Monaco. You literally can't ignore it. So I'm going to give Sergio Perez an A star. He out-qualified his teammate. He had been faster than Perez literally than Verstappen all weekend. That's an A just because it's very hard to beat Max anyways. This is the first time a teammate has beaten him on pure pace since 2018. Obviously the Ricciardo year, the last year Ricciardo year, 2018. So with Sergio, it says for itself. A star, obviously race win. Didn't get a fast lap. Lando Norris got a fast lap. I forgot about that. But yeah, race win, out qualifying his teammate, having the composure to lead like he did. Sergio Perez, A star. I'll give Sainz an A. Very close to Charles throughout the weekend. Qualifying Charles sort of turn it on a little bit more. But yeah, managed to, I'll give Carlos an A. A much better weekend from Carlos than it has been the rest of the year. Like this will hopefully be a turning point for Carlos, beating Charles. I mean, obviously he did get sort of second place handed to him after Ferrari screwed Charles over, but even so, yeah. In P3, Verstappen, unfortunately for Max, I'm going to give him a C for this race. Again, out qualified by Checo, and then also and obviously he was struggling all weekend as well, unfortunately. Just not as weekend for Max Verstappen, unfortunately. Obviously, I can't grade strategy because that's nothing to do with the drivers really. Oh, and also with Sainz, and the reason why I got a good thing was that was his call to go for slicks rather than going for inters. Whether a driver jumps someone or not, I can't really judge that. But Verstappen, I'll give him a C. Leclerc, for Charles, I'll give him a B because obviously he qualified on pole, but the race result was less than ideal. He was sort of fell into. It was not as fast as Perez, Lance and Verstappen as well for the rest of the race, but obviously Leclerc was on pole, so I'll give him a B. George Russell, I'll give him an A. A pretty good race for George. Same with Lando, I'll give Lando an A as well. Fernando, I'll give him a B just because he annoyed me. No, I'm joking. I'll give Fernando an A as well. Awesome race from Fernando, getting that Alpine in P7, and obviously with qualifying as well. Getting that Alpine in P7, and just having the getting the Alpine in P7. And obviously getting the Alpine in P7 and qualifying. Better when they were looking down and out at the start of the weekend, was pretty damn good. Lewis Hamilton, I'll give him probably a C for Lewis. Fairly unspectacular compared to George, I guess, really. He was lapping well at the start of the race, but sort of, obviously, Fernando screwed him over. Actually, give him a B, because Fernando wasn't really his fault. But, unfortunately for Lewis, wasn't as fast as George over the weekend. Valtteri Bottas in P9, I'll give him a B, because he improved in his qualifying result. And Valtteri was pretty quick all weekend, other than obviously when he was with limited running as well, because of how he missed FP1 obviously. Seb, I'll give Seb a B. It was a pretty good qualifying session, getting up into the top 10, but obviously he did he lost a position to Bottas in the race, and also he did. Pierre Gasly, I'll give Gasly a B. Obviously, because the race was pretty good. I would have given it a D for qualifying. Pierre had an awful qualifying. Obviously, he got caught out, but still, you have plenty of time to settle up at Monaco. So he sort of upgraded by the awesome race that Gasly had, just missing out on the points. Ocon caused a collision as well. I'll give Ocon a C. Quite far Fernando, I guess, as well. No, he wasn't, but either way, I'll probably give Ocon a C. Ricciardo, C. Ricciardo, I'll give him a C. Not a great weekend from Daniel's part. Lance Stroll, out-qualified by Seb, didn't really, fairly unspectacular in the race. I'll give Lance a C as well. I'll give it a T for a B, because although he put it in the wall, beating Alex, two strong weekends in a row for Latifi. Obviously, having Nick De Vries in the wings, sort of waiting, is part of the reason why I expect. But Nicky's had not a awful weekend like he has done recently, or since Abu Dhabi really. So I think his confidence is building up again. But I'll give Nicky a B. Zhou Guan Yu, do you know what? I'm going to give him a C. Although I will commend him for, he did get a little bit racy, but unfortunately he lost 4 positions. He was overtaken a couple of times for Zhou Guan Yu. Obviously not really, this is his first Grand Prix at Monaco in F1, obviously, so there's a different beast than the junior categories. And Yuki Tsunoda in P17 made a couple of mistakes. I give Tsunoda a C. He did have a good qualifying, but unfortunately, a good qualifying, better than Gasly, obviously. But yeah, I'll give Tsunoda a C. Just a couple of mistakes sort of ruining his race at the end, so was Zhou Guan Yu really as well. But yeah, that's my grades for the Monaco Grand Prix. Just to wrap it up as well, I don't know when I'm going to be back. It might be for Baku. I might do a podcast in between on something NFL, maybe something football at the time, or maybe athletics. Some other sport I might do a podcast on potentially. You never know. But if not, I'll be back in 2 weeks' time for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix race recap. Thank you for watching and listening. If you're whatever platform you're watching me on, it's been a really good podcast. Been rushing a little bit today. I don't know why. I just sort of, maybe I'm in a great mood really. The Monaco Grand Prix was really awesome. I hope you enjoy listening to me as much as I enjoyed talking about the Monaco Grand Prix today. So without further ado, thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for listening to me ramble. I know I can go on a lot. I get told that a lot by people close to me. But yeah, thank you for listening to me talk about F1, about the Monaco Grand Prix. Please keep Monaco in F1. And have a good rest of the day, everyone, or evening, if you're watching this evening, because obviously I'm recording in the evening as well, as you can see it's dark behind me. But yeah, goodbye, everyone.